All right, let's dive into some case law on presidential immunity, specifically the 1982 case of Nixon versus Fitzgerald. This is decided 8 years after Nixon left office. He resigned in disgrace. It was decided on a 5-4 scale. Lewis Powell writing the majority opinion. Lewis Powell, of course, was appointed by Richard Nixon. And basically what happened in that case was there was some drama in the Nixon White House even before Watergate. This involved Arthur Fitzgerald, who in 1970 had lost his job as a management analyst with the Department of the Air Force. H.R. Haldeman was told by the White House aide Butterfield that, quote, Fitzgerald must be given very low marks in loyalty. Fitzgerald says that his discharge was unlawful retaliation for his testimony before a congressional committee. The district court ultimately ruled that Nixon was not entitled to claim absolute presidential immunity. And so this gets up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and Justice Powell writes the majority opinion saying that the President of the United States has absolute presidential immunity from damages liability for acts within the outer perimeter of his official responsibility. President Nixon's allegedly wrongful discharge is in the outer perimeter of his authority. Therefore, he gets immunity from it. Now, there's a policy angle to this too, and Powell's going to talk about the policy. He says that this rule of absolute liability will not, as a policy matter, leave the country without sufficient protection against the president's misconduct. If we grant the president absolute immunity in a case like this, that will not go on to give the president some big, dark, scary, unfettered power. And Powell points out these other areas in which the president's power is in fact curbed. He points out that the press is constantly scrutinizing the president. The press definitely scrutinizes the president these days. Congress also oversees the president. You know, Congress and the president, they have a very close relationship. And yeah, Congress is definitely looking at what the president's doing very closely. So that, Powell says, is going to be a check on the president's power, even if they get absolute immunity in a case like this. So he says that diversion of the president's energies by concerns with private lawsuits would threaten the effective functioning of government. So very much a functionalist policy standpoint of, hey, we want government to function well. We do not want it being impeded by these lawsuits. Even if these lawsuits kind of have merit, we're going to say, no, the president of the United States is going to get some immunity for a case like this. And we have a dissent by Justice Byron White, who is actually a more conservative justice, but not appointed by Nixon, appointed by John F. Kennedy, actually. He says this decision is just placing the president above the law. And I wonder what he would say about the 2024 case of Trump versus United States, which of course was decided by the Roberts Court and was a 6-3 decision with all the conservative justices giving the president immunity for any decision, any action he takes, which could arguably be considered an official act. So yeah, they cited Nixon versus Fitzgerald a lot in that case. Another case that referenced Nixon versus Fitzgerald was Clinton versus Jones, a 1997 case involving President Bill Clinton and a suit against him. He had quite a bit of misconduct, and Paula Jones sued him. But in Clinton versus Jones, the Supreme Court actually ruled against Bill Clinton. They said that they need to clarify Nixon versus Fitzgerald. And they specifically clarified that a president is subject to civil suits for actions that they do before they assume the role of the presidency. So yeah, before you're president, you can't be subject to suits for what you do. So if you are planning to run for president, please, I implore you, do not do anything that will open you up to liability, because you may just get sued during your term, your first term or your second term, like Bill Clinton was. Let me know what you think about this decision. It's kind of in contrast with the original Nixon decision from 1974, where the court ruled against Richard Nixon when he argued for executive privilege. But this one, there was definitely a basis for ruling against Nixon, as evidenced by the fact that it was a 5-4 decision. But ultimately, Nixon won the day, and presidential immunity won the day for those actions taken in the outer perimeter of your presidency. Like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. I hope that if you're studying law, you found this video helpful. I hope you can take it to your constitutional law exam or whatever and get a straight A+. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you in my next video.